Sarah's life, from the outside, appeared flawless. Married to the charming and seemingly perfect Olivia, the couple's social media accounts boasted picturesque vacations, shared accomplishments, and a steady, unwavering partnership. They were the envy of their friends, two successful women in love, seemingly destined for a fairy tale life. But all that glitters wasn't gold. It started with a quiet disagreement at a dinner party, a simple conversation that should have ended in a polite but firm discussion. Instead, Sarah watched in disbelief as Olivia's facade cracked. The sweet, perfect partner had moments of coldness, flashes of temper that no one else saw. And as the night wore on, the cracks deepened. The tipping point came one evening when Sarah came home to an empty house, her phone buzzing with messages from Olivia. The text was brief but chilling. "I need space. I can't do this anymore." That was it. The moment that shattered Sarah's carefully constructed reality. The marriage that had seemed unbreakable, unraveled in a heartbeat. Olivia, the woman who seemed to have it all, had been hiding dark secrets all along. To the outside world, she had everything: beauty, wealth, a perfect marriage. But behind closed doors, something was falling apart. The tension in their home was palpable, but only a few people, Sarah included, had seen it. And even fewer understood how quickly things could spiral. Sarah had once believed their relationship was built on a foundation of love, trust, and shared dreams. She could still remember their first date, the way Olivia had laughed at her jokes, how they had stayed up late talking about everything and nothing at all. There were early mornings filled with coffee and lazy weekends spent planning a future together. They were unstoppable, an inseparable pair that everyone admired. But as time passed, something began to shift. The woman who had once seemed so selfless and full of energy began to retreat into herself. Olivia's charm, her dazzling smile, the way she could light up a room, started to feel more like a performance. And while she always appeared perfect in public, the cracks in their relationship were starting to show. Olivia became less concerned with the needs of their relationship and more fixated on her own desires. Small arguments over insignificant things grew into battles. But it wasn't the fights that worried Sarah. It was the subtle manipulation, the lies that Olivia started to weave so naturally. It wasn't just a difference of opinion anymore. Olivia would twist words, make Sarah doubt her own perceptions. She'd charm her friends, leaving Sarah feeling like the outsider in her own marriage. Behind the scenes, Sarah was often the one putting out the fires that Olivia started, cleaning up messes Olivia had created, covering for her in front of friends and family. But it wasn't just the lies that hurt. It was the realization that Olivia, the woman she had trusted more than anyone, was willing to hurt her in ways she hadn't seen coming. Those small, seemingly harmless behaviors had started to add up, and Sarah could feel her world slowly crumbling. The first sign that their marriage might be in more trouble than Sarah realized came unexpectedly: financial issues. Olivia had always been the one to handle the glamorous side of life: designer clothes, spontaneous vacations, and high-end dinners. But what Sarah hadn't noticed was how far Olivia's spending had drifted from their shared budget, how quickly the credit card bills began to pile up. At first, it was easy to dismiss: a few splurges here and there, a new handbag, a weekend getaway. But soon, the bills started stacking higher than either of them could ignore. The tipping point came during a trip to an exclusive resort. Olivia had insisted on booking an extravagant suite overlooking the beach, a price tag Sarah had raised an eyebrow at, but Olivia dismissed her concerns. "It'll be fine," she had said with a careless wave. "It's just for a few days." But when the bill arrived, it was far from just for a few days. Thousands of dollars in charges had been racked up: spa treatments, overpriced room service, exclusive activities, and Olivia had neither paid them nor intended to. When Sarah confronted her, Olivia's response was calm, almost indifferent. "Don't worry, you'll take care of it. You always do." In that moment, Sarah felt something inside her snap: the constant bailing out, the growing realization that Olivia saw no need to take responsibility. It wasn't just the money. It was the way Olivia treated their relationship as a safety net for her own reckless behavior. Sarah's patience was running thin, but Olivia's dismissive attitude only deepened the wound. She didn't even seem to understand that there was a breaking point. What hurt more than the financial strain was the growing awareness of how deep the manipulation had gone. Olivia's casual entitlement was a constant reminder that Sarah was not just a partner in her eyes, she was a tool to fix whatever messes Olivia created. The emotional conflict that raged within Sarah was a storm of betrayal, anger, and helplessness. She was losing patience with Olivia, but the thought of confronting her felt impossible. How could she leave the woman she had once loved? How could she expose all of this, knowing it would destroy everything? But as time went on, Sarah realized she was already broken. She couldn't stay silent anymore. It was in the midst of their latest fight, another round of tension that neither of them knew how to end, that Sarah made an unexpected decision. She had spent weeks wrestling with her thoughts, feeling the weight of the years they'd spent together. But in the end, Sarah knew she had reached her limit. The realization was as painful as it was clear. This wasn't love anymore. This was a prison. The papers were on the kitchen counter when Olivia came home that night. At first, Olivia didn't notice them, too distracted by her phone and the latest message from her friends. But when she did, her eyes widened, and the reality of what was happening hit her with a force she wasn't prepared for. The divorce papers, signed, final, lay there like an indictment of everything that had gone wrong. Olivia stared at them in disbelief, as if the words were written in a language she didn't understand. "What is this?" Olivia asked, her voice wavering, though she tried to maintain her composure. "You've pushed me too far, Olivia," Sarah said softly, her voice steady. "I can't keep doing this." Olivia's reaction was swift. Shock, confusion, then anger. "You can't be serious. This isn't how we do things. We work through our problems. We fix things." But there was no fixing it anymore. Sarah had tried for so long, cleaning up messes, offering forgiveness, making excuses for behaviors that were becoming intolerable. But Olivia refused to see it. To her, Sarah had always been the one who would clean up the wreckage, who would fix the problems that Olivia never took responsibility for. But not anymore. The final blow came when they arrived at the resort for one last trip together, a desperate attempt at reconciling what was already beyond repair. As they walked into the lobby, the staff informed them that the outstanding bills hadn't been paid, and the truth of Olivia's lifestyle came crashing down. Her friends, the ones who had always adored her, began to distance themselves, whispers of her financial irresponsibility spreading like wildfire. Olivia's well-curated image of success and luxury shattered before her eyes. Olivia's humiliation was palpable, her social circle turning on her in a way Sarah had never imagined. The people who had once envied Olivia now saw her for who she truly was, someone who had neglected the most important things in life for the sake of appearances. It wasn't just the resort bills or the luxury items. It was the truth of Olivia's selfishness, the truth Sarah had been living with for so long, now exposed to the world. As the night wore on and Olivia's world crumbled, Sarah saw the final unraveling of the woman she had once loved. Her identity, her image, had been built on lies and materialism, and now there was nothing left. The first few weeks after the divorce were a mix of relief and guilt. Sarah had thought that the moment Olivia was no longer in her life, the weight would lift. And in many ways, it did. No longer did she wake up to the cold silence of unresolved tension. No longer was she dreading the phone calls that always felt like a lifeline for Olivia's latest mess. But in the quiet aftermath, Sarah also felt the emotional weight of what she had just done, ending a marriage she had invested so much of her life into. The decision to walk away hadn't come easily, and as she looked back, she found herself asking if there was any other way. Was there something she had missed? Could she have saved the relationship? Still, as time went on, Sarah realized how much of herself she had lost in trying to fix someone else. The space that was once filled with anxiety and tension now allowed room for her own growth. She threw herself into her work, focusing on projects that she had put off for too long. For the first time in years, she felt like she was living for herself, not for Olivia, or the perfect image they had once created. She enrolled in a yoga class, something she'd always wanted to try, and began reading books on personal growth. Slowly but surely, Sarah was rediscovering who she was without the weight of Olivia's baggage dragging her down. When it came time to explain the changes to the children, Sarah approached the conversation with calm and honesty. "Your mom and I are no longer together," she said gently, her voice steady. But that doesn't change how much we both love you. She knew that the separation would be hard for them, but she also knew that a life of constant tension would have been far worse. They didn't need to understand the reasons right away. They just needed to know they were safe, loved, and that they'd continue to have the support of both parents. Meanwhile, Olivia's life had begun to unravel in ways Sarah couldn't have anticipated. The friends who had once adored her, who had complimented her on her charm and success, slowly started to drift away. They had seen the cracks in Olivia's persona but had ignored them. Now, those cracks were impossible to overlook. She couldn't keep up the act any longer. Financially, Olivia's instability was more than just inconvenient. It was crippling. Her lavish lifestyle had left her with nothing but debt and empty promises. Unable to maintain the same facade she had carefully crafted for years, Olivia was now facing the consequences of her reckless decisions. Despite her efforts to keep up appearances, she found herself seeking out the comfort of her brother, who had always been a distant figure in her life. But even he could see through her charades. Olivia, who had once been the one to hold the power in their relationship, was now the one begging for help. She refused to take responsibility, though, always blaming others. Her upbringing, the people who let her down, even Sarah. Olivia clung to the belief that her problems could be solved by someone else. Sarah couldn't help but feel a flicker of sympathy, but that was all it was. Sympathy. Olivia had made her choices, and now she had to face the consequences. It came one evening when Sarah was just finishing up a work project. An unexpected number flashing on her phone. She knew it was Olivia before she even answered. The voice on the other end was different, shaky, almost vulnerable. "Sarah," Olivia said softly, her usual confident tone now replaced by something fragile. I need to apologize. I know I've hurt you, and I don't even know where to begin, but I'm so sorry." Sarah was quiet for a moment, the words hanging in the air between them. She'd expected this call eventually. Olivia had always found ways to spin things in her favor, always knew how to make Sarah feel like she owed her something. But this time, something was different. There was no manipulation in her tone, just raw, unfiltered regret. But as much as Sarah felt the stirrings of empathy, she knew one thing for sure. She wasn't going back. She couldn't. "Olivia," she began, her voice steady, "I appreciate that you're sorry, but I've already made my decision. I can't be the person you keep leaning on. I've given everything I had, and I need to keep moving forward for myself." There was a long pause on the other end. Olivia's breath hitched, and for a moment Sarah thought she might cry. But the words that followed were filled with the same defensiveness she'd come to expect. I don't know what I'm supposed to do now. I don't know how to fix this." "You can't fix it, Olivia," Sarah said, a quiet resolve filling her voice. "You need to take responsibility for your actions, and so do I. We can't go back to what we were. It's over." The call ended quietly, and for the first time, Sarah felt a sense of closure. It was painful, but it was final. She'd made peace with her decision. And in that peace, she found strength to move on, to let go of the past, and to build a future that was all her own. Sarah had always been so focused on the relationship, on Olivia, on fixing their marriage, that she'd lost touch with who she was outside of being a wife and a partner. Now, with the weight of the divorce finally behind her, she began to rediscover parts of herself she had forgotten. It started small. An old hobby she had once loved, painting, was something she decided to revisit. She pulled out the canvas and brushes from the back of the closet, and the simple act of creating something for herself with no expectation other than personal satisfaction brought a sense of peace she hadn't felt in years. Slowly, she built new routines. Morning walks, coffee dates with old friends, trips to the local farmer's market, things she had once enjoyed before the marriage consumed her. There was a freedom in doing things just for herself. Her relationships with friends blossomed too. She reconnected with old college roommates, having dinner parties, and getting to know each other again beyond the surface-level check-ins. They saw her not as the wife of Olivia, but as Sarah. Funny, kind, resilient. It was liberating, feeling appreciated and valued for who she was rather than the role she played in someone else's story. Among these new connections, Emily entered Sarah's life. Emily wasn't someone Sarah had expected, but there was an ease to their friendship that felt natural and refreshing. Emily saw Sarah not as someone who had been in a high-profile marriage, but as the person she had always been underneath all the layers. They spent hours talking about everything and nothing. There was no agenda, no hidden expectations. Just two people building a connection based on mutual respect, shared experiences, and honest conversation. At home, the family dynamic was also starting to change. The children were adjusting better than Sarah had expected, and the moments of joy they shared together were precious. There were family dinners without tension, movie nights without uncomfortable silences, and weekends filled with genuine laughter. They had started to feel the relief of a home that wasn't constantly disrupted by Olivia's erratic behavior. Sarah could finally focus on her role as a mother without the constant stress of managing someone else's crises. As the days passed, it became clearer that Sarah's decision, painful as it had been, was the right one for everyone. The children were happier, more settled, and Sarah was finally rebuilding her own life, piece by piece, with the confidence that had been absent for so long. Olivia's life post-divorce was a harsh wake-up call. She had always lived in the luxury of Sarah's support, relying on her for emotional, financial, and logistical stability. Now, with no one to fix her problems, she found herself struggling to adjust to a more modest lifestyle. The reality of living without the financial cushion she had taken for granted was overwhelming. The house, once filled with expensive furniture and designer clothes, now felt cold and empty. Olivia had to learn to budget, cook for herself, and handle the basic aspects of her life that she had once avoided. Employment, which had always seemed like an afterthought in their marriage, became a necessity. Olivia applied to several jobs, but her qualifications were thin, and her long absence from the workforce made it difficult to find a position that matched her previous lifestyle. She took a few part-time jobs to make ends meet, but nothing felt secure. She had spent so long in the bubble of luxury and ease that now, working long hours in customer service or retail, she struggled with feelings of failure and embarrassment. The woman who had once been admired for her perfect life was now just another person trying to make it on her own. But something unexpected happened. Olivia started attending her children's events more regularly. It wasn't out of obligation, but out of a real desire to be part of their lives, to rebuild the connection she had lost. She had never been particularly involved before, too distracted by her own desires to invest in the lives of her kids. But now, with the reality of her situation settling in, she began making genuine efforts to reconnect, trying to be the mother they needed. It wasn't easy. Olivia's actions still reflected a great deal of selfishness, but she was slowly facing the consequences of her past decisions. Desperation crept in as she realized that the glamorous life she once had was gone, and no one was there to bail her out anymore. Sarah, who had been keeping her distance, noticed some of the changes. Olivia had reached out a few times, even apologized for some of the things she'd done, but Sarah remained cautious. The mistakes Olivia had made were too many to overlook, and though she saw the efforts Olivia was making, she knew that trust couldn't be rebuilt overnight. Sarah acknowledged Olivia's attempts at change, but she knew she couldn't allow herself to be dragged back into the toxic cycle. There was a part of her that felt a flicker of empathy for the woman she had once loved, but that part was overshadowed by the need to protect her own peace. Olivia still had a long way to go, and Sarah wasn't ready to let her back in just yet. The last face-to-face meeting between Sarah and Olivia took place in a quiet cafe, the kind of place neither of them had ever frequented when they were together. It was neutral ground. No luxury, no pretenses, just a space for honest conversation. Olivia, who had always been so composed, was visibly nervous. Her hands trembled slightly as she picked up her coffee, as if trying to gather her thoughts into something meaningful. "I've thought about this moment for so long," Olivia began, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "I know I've hurt you. I've hurt everyone I loved, and I don't know how to fix it, but I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything. The lies, the manipulations, the way I made you feel like nothing you did was enough." "I appreciate that, Olivia. I really do," Sarah said after a long pause. But it's too late. I can't go back to what we were. We've both changed, and we can't undo the damage. I've learned so much from all of this, about myself, about what I'm worth, and I can't lose that for anything. Olivia's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. For the first time in years, there was no defensiveness, no justification. She understood. There was a rawness in the air, a brief moment where both women, though scarred by the past, seemed to acknowledge each other's pain. "I guess this is it then," Olivia whispered, her voice fragile. "Yeah," Sarah replied, her tone softer than it had been in years, "but I think we're both going to be okay." They sat in silence for a while, not needing to say anything more. No reconciliation, but a sense of mutual understanding passed between them. They were finally free, in their own ways, and while their paths would never cross as they once had, there was a quiet respect in knowing they had both found their way forward. With the finality of her divorce settled, Sarah found herself embracing a future she had once feared. The pain of the past, though still present, had softened with time. There were moments of doubt, memories that would surface unexpectedly, but Sarah had learned to accept them without letting them define her. She had done the hardest thing. She had walked away, and in doing so, had reclaimed her life. Life with Emily grew stronger with each passing day. They spent weekends exploring new places, from quiet hikes to spontaneous weekend trips, and in every moment, Sarah felt the peace she had longed for. Emily brought a sense of calm to Sarah's life, not with grand gestures, but in the way she simply was, kind, patient, and wholly present. They started planning for a future together, talking about places they wanted to visit, dreams they wanted to chase. It wasn't the fairy tale Sarah had once imagined, but it was real, and it was hers. At home, the children continued to flourish. The new family dynamic was one built on stability, love, and mutual respect. They had a rhythm now, a new routine without the constant tension and chaos of Olivia's erratic presence. Family outings were joyful, the laughter of her children filling the space with warmth. Sarah had the freedom to be fully present with them, not distracted by the turmoil of her past. She found herself genuinely happy for the first time in years, her heart lighter and her soul at peace. Meanwhile, Olivia was beginning to rebuild her life. Slowly but surely, she found a new job that, while not glamorous, gave her a sense of purpose. It wasn't the life of excess she had once known, but it was hers to navigate. Olivia had taken the first steps towards self-sufficiency, and though her journey was far from easy, it was hers to make. She made continued efforts to reconnect with her children, attending their events and reaching out more, though it was clear her relationship with them would take time to heal. Sarah, though sympathetic to Olivia's struggles, maintained her boundaries. She had moved on, and she knew Olivia's recovery, while important, was something that did not need to include her. The past was where it belonged, and Sarah's future, one filled with love, growth, and a newfound sense of self, was just beginning. She could finally look forward with hope, ready to embrace all that was yet to come. Looking back, Sarah marveled at how far she had come. The woman who had once been consumed by doubt and fear, clinging to a relationship that had drained her, was now standing in a place of peace. The heartbreak that had once seemed insurmountable had transformed into something different, a deep, unshakable understanding of who she was and what she deserved. The journey, though painful, had led her to places she never thought she would find. Places where she could breathe freely, live authentically, and love again without the weight of her past holding her down. She had learned the importance of trust, first in herself, then in others. Self-respect had become the cornerstone of her new life, and love, both for herself and those who truly valued her, was no longer something to be compromised. Sarah had learned to embrace her own worth, to prioritize her happiness over appeasing someone else, and to walk away from toxicity no matter how difficult. Olivia's future, however, remained uncertain. Sarah had no illusions about the challenges her ex-wife would face. The life Olivia had once known was gone, and it was up to her to navigate her own path now. Sarah didn't wish Olivia ill. She didn't harbor any animosity, but she understood that Olivia must face the consequences of her actions. The choices she had made had led them both to this point, and though there was no anger in Sarah's heart, There was a quiet recognition that life, for both of them, would continue moving forward. For Sarah, there was a final sense of closure. The past no longer held its power over her, and as she looked toward the future, she knew that while the journey had been long, it had ultimately brought her to a place of peace. Her life would continue, shaped by the lessons learned and the growth that had come from the pain. Sarah stood at the edge of the lake, the sun setting in a burst of orange and pink across the horizon. Emily stood beside her, their children running along the shore, their laughter echoing in the stillness of the evening. The future stretched out before them, full of possibility and hope. The family had found a new rhythm, one built on trust, love, and mutual respect. Emily and Sarah were planning their next adventure together, taking the time to savor the quiet moments that had once been absent from Sarah's life. The children were thriving, their smiles brighter, their days filled with happiness. And Sarah felt a deep sense of contentment. She had learned the true value of her own happiness, realizing that it was hers to create, unburdened by the mistakes of her past. The life she had built now wasn't perfect, but it was hers. And for the first time in a long time, she was at peace with that. As the wind brushed against her face and the evening light faded into twilight, Sarah knew that the future held nothing but promise. She had made it through the storm, and now she was ready to embrace the calm.